The CEO snapped in front of everyone and pointed at me like office furniture. He told me to bring the coffee dispatcher as if the room had already agreed on my place. Laughter rolled across the tables, polite, sharp, and obedient, because people laugh when they think authority has finished the story. I lifted the cup, walked 2 measured steps, and placed it on the edge of the stage where attention already lived. There was no rush, no explanation, no performance. I kept moving past executives, past reserved seats, and toward the podium, without asking permission. He stood abruptly, face tightening as control slipped from his voice. He ordered me to sit down, louder this time, convinced public pressure would pull me back into position. I did not turn my head. I tapped the microphone once, waited for the echo to fade, and let the silence stretch. Every eye followed me as I looked across the room and spoke evenly. I said I was calling a board meeting effective immediately to address leadership that confused ownership with service. I asked for the removal of a CEO who believed the majority shareholder poured coffee. Laughter stopped, breath caught, and careers quietly changed direction. In that pause, I understood something permanent had shifted. Age teaches you moments like this are rare and irreversible. I did not feel triumph, only certainty. The cup remained on stage untouched. The podium belonged to facts now. And everyone present sensed this was not a scene but a transfer of authority. No one spoke because experience recognized when power settles and arguments no longer matter permanently here. They called me dispatcher because it was easier to shrink a person than understand them. The words sounded harmless, practical, almost invisible. It allowed them to treat me as a tool rather than a decision maker. They enjoyed walking past me during crises, watching me coordinate trucks, solve timing errors, and rescue contracts without ever raising my voice. The headset on my desk became their symbol of where they believed I belonged. It kept them comfortable and it kept me underestimated. I accepted the label without protest because it gave me room to observe the company without interference. I saw who froze when pressure rose and who became loud to hide confusion. I watched managers rewrite stories to protect their pride and employees who delivered real work disappear behind someone else's speeches. I learned patterns older professionals recognize instinctively. People repeat themselves when they believe no one important is listening. Their habits revealed the culture far better than any report. The CEO relied on that culture. He liked the idea of a dispatcher who fixed everything and asked for nothing. He never questioned how I understood the financial structure or why I met vendors with such confidence. He never wondered why board members greeted me with more warmth than him. His world was built on assumptions, and assumptions always age poorly. What he never imagined was that the company he treated like a personal stage existed because I once wrote a quiet check when it was nothing more than sketches and hope. My shares lived inside a trust designed to stay silent until needed. Silence is not weakness. It is strategy. And strategy waits patiently for the moment when truth becomes unavoidable. After the moment on stage, I did not raise my voice or trade insults. I relied on the one thing that never trembles under pressure: structure. While he tried to turn the incident into office humor, I opened the folder I had prepared weeks earlier and placed it on the conference table. He continued smiling at the directors, but his expression began to shift when he noticed the seals and timestamps on the first page. Inside that folder lived the story he hoped no one would ever read. Voting rights arranged in a pattern he never fully understood. Share classes that limited his authority far more than his speeches suggested. Contract deviations approved without the second signature required by policy. Expense reports that moved through loopholes only because no one expected someone called dispatcher to examine them. It was not personal. It was governance. Older professionals know that governance has no patience for charm. I added a second folder, and the room became quiet. It contained the resumes of friends he placed in key positions with salaries that climbed faster than company performance. Each hiring file showed the same pattern: bright language, inflated claims, and missing evaluations. The directors read in silence because adults do not interrupt evidence. When the board secretary finally called the meeting to order, the CEO attempted a confident smile. Yet, he understood something irreversible. The problem was not my tone or my job title. The problem was that every document carried a data signature and a witness. Paper does not protect feelings. Paper protects truth. And truth had arrived with perfect timing. When we entered the boardroom, he tried to reclaim the authority he felt slipping from his hands. He spoke quickly and confidently, as if a louder tone could smooth the edges of every document placed before him. He called the situation a misunderstanding and insisted that emotions rather than facts had created confusion. He repeated dispatcher with a practiced smile, hoping repetition would reduce my presence and restore his comfort. Some directors exchanged glances because adults who have led companies understand when someone is acting rather than answering. The board chair let him speak until the room grew tired of the performance. Then a single question cut through his story with the precision of a blade. The chair asked if he was declaring that the majority shareholder had lied about ownership. The words settled on the table like weight. His charm faltered because the question demanded truth, not personality. He tried to redirect the discussion toward vision and future plans. He talked about growth, innovation, and momentum, but the room no longer followed his script. Silence held firm because everyone present had read the documents. They knew the difference between ambition and accountability. I placed one more folder in front of him. Inside was the legal opinion he had ignored, along with 2 letters requesting clarification that he never answered. They were not angry letters. They were formal notices, and every director understood their meaning. He looked at the folder as if it reflected every decision he had avoided. In that moment, he finally recognized that the room no longer revolved around him. It revolved around facts, and facts did not blink. The vote did not appear out of thin air. It grew slowly from hours of steady questioning. The directors approached the situation with the patience of people who had already lived entire careers filled with pressure and conflict. Their questions were calm, not confrontational. They were crafted to expose truth rather than trap anyone. Every inquiry examined a policy, a signature, or a deviation until a clear picture formed. Professionals over 50 understand this rhythm. It is the rhythm of leaders who value clarity more than theater. He tried to answer with confidence, but his words kept circling without landing. Each explanation opened a new inconsistency. Every inconsistency matched a document already placed in front of him. He shifted in his seat as the timeline of his decisions unraveled page by page. The board did not raise their voices. They simply followed the evidence and allowed each silence to speak for itself. At one point, he asked for a pause so he could speak to me privately. He approached with a softer tone and offered a series of incentives. A new title selected to impress. A generous raise framed as recognition. Promises of public respect from a man who had never practiced it. He offered everything except responsibility for his actions. It was an offer built to protect him, not the company. I listened without anger and declined with the same calm I had used all day. I returned to my seat and asked the chair to continue. The directors resumed their questions with a sense of finality. They knew the meeting was no longer about emotion. It was about stewardship. And stewardship always chooses truth over comfort. When the board chair read the motion, the room shifted into a different atmosphere. The words were simple and carried no emotion. Removal for governance violations and material misrepresentation. There was no debate left to hold because every page of evidence had already spoken. Older professionals in the room understood what was happening. Decisions made quietly often carry the most weight. The CEO stood still for a moment, as if waiting for someone to interrupt the process and restore his authority. No one moved. Security entered with the discipline of people trained to protect dignity even in difficult moments. They were calm, measured, and respectful. They did not touch him or rush him. They simply waited for him to comply with the terms set by the board. He attempted to straighten his jacket, trying to regain the posture he used during public events. He forced a smile, but it arrived too late and convinced no one. The illusion of control dissolves quickly when structure steps forward. He gathered his belongings with slow movements, glancing around the table as if searching for an ally. No one met his eyes for long. Not out of cruelty, but because the truth had already been accepted. His departure was not personal. It was procedural. He walked toward the door, then turned and delivered the threats he believed would intimidate me. He promised lawsuits, revenge, and public retaliation. His voice rose as if volume could reverse a decision grounded in documented facts. I remained silent. I did not need to argue. The board had already anchored their choice in the only evidence that matters to responsible leadership. The signatures had closed the chapter before he reached the hallway. The week that followed did not feel like victory. It felt like responsibility returning to its proper place. There were no handshakes or speeches. Instead, the company shifted into a form of quiet repair that seasoned professionals recognize as the true beginning of change. Finance reviewed every approval line by line to understand how far his decisions had stretched policy. HR reopened files and examined each hire to confirm qualifications and salary structures. Compliance rebuilt reporting systems that had been weakened by shortcuts. Even vendors noticed the shift when they received new contacts with clear instructions and timelines. Inside the building, people moved differently. Some who had avoided eye contact before now approached with questions and updates. They remembered every moment they had called me dispatcher and realized that silence had been a shield rather than a definition. I did not correct anyone or ask for apologies. I focused on reorganizing what needed strength and allowed accountability to handle what required correction. The board supported each step because they wanted stability, not spectacle. During this period, the company did not transform into perfection. It simply grew into a more honest version of itself. Meetings became shorter because excuses disappeared. Reports improved because people wrote what actually happened rather than what they wished to present. Pressure remained, but it became clean pressure. I chose to stay close to operations. It was not sentiment. It was clarity. Operations is where truth appears first. It is where promises confront reality. It is where authority must earn its place every day. In that environment, illusions cannot survive and leadership becomes measurable again. If you are over 50, you already understand the distance between performance and substance. You have watched people rise quickly by speaking loudly and fall even faster when the work begins to ask for proof. Experience teaches that authority does not announce itself. It documents its value and lets time confirm what pride tries to hide. When someone dismisses you or reduces your contribution to a title, remember that dismissal is not an assessment. It is a reflection of their limits, not yours. Never rush to correct a person who misunderstands your role. Rushing gives their opinion weight it never earned. Instead, let structure speak for you. Write clearly. Track decisions. Note agreements. Support your work with the kind of evidence that remains solid even when rooms change and memories fail. Documentation is not a burden. It is protection. It becomes the bridge between silence and authority. When conflict arises, avoid the temptation to fight for recognition. Recognition rooted in emotion fades. Recognition rooted in facts stays. People who underestimate experienced professionals often do so because they believe maturity lacks ambition. In truth, maturity carries a different ambition. It seeks stability rather than applause. It seeks clarity rather than chaos. It seeks results that last. If someone tries to minimize your value, do not answer with anger. Answer with consistency. Show the record. Show the work. Show the pattern they refuse to see. Those who depend on noise will eventually collide with consequences created by their own choices. Experience is not expensive. Ignorance is. People who call experience too expensive eventually receive the invoice.